right. Well, welcome to our joint webinar with Shinedelight Services Enterprises and PivotGround. I'm Sarah Olivieri, and this is Abigail Davidson. I'm going to kind of go through here. I'm going to let Abigail introduce herself. I'll tell you about myself, and then we're going to dive right in to our topic of the day.
I am Abigail Davidson. Yes, I'm speaking of myself in the third person. I'm a little camera shy. I am the founder and CEO at Shinedelight Enterprises. Initially, we were Shinedelight Web and Writing Services. We have now evolved into Shinedelight Enterprises. Within our enterprise, we are comprised of 6 divisions. These are the 6 divisions that are most needed in the sense of business solutions. So what we offer is that one-stop business solution for anyone coming in needing our services. We set them all up concurrently, or just kind of move them almost like an assembly line from one department to the other until those full client needs has been met.
Yeah, thanks.
And then you're with us. We keep you engaged and on board.
Yeah, that's one of the things when Abigail and I met that I really appreciated, because especially for nonprofits who don't have a lot of digital marketing know-how, often it can be really hard to coordinate multiple agencies, marketing agencies that you're working with who are doing different things, and even coordinating a team of contractors. That's actually even harder. As someone who's done it, I'm sure, Abigail, you've managed contractors. It's a job in itself for sure.
Yes.
So she is going to be a great resource, both as a business owner and as an expert in all things digital marketing. I'm Sarah Olivieri. I'm a nonprofit business strategist. I love to help nonprofits change the way they operate so they can thrive. I used to be an executive director. I've been in your shoes. And I also was a marketer for a while. So I've been in Abigail's shoes. And so I'm so excited to be bringing my nonprofit people to one of my other loves, marketing people, especially those people who know a lot about written communication, which Abigail's an expert in. So if you have questions for her, put them in the comments for sure. So why are we here today? We're here because we're seeing some issues come up as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we just wanted to let you know you're in the right place, tell you the kinds of issues you are seeing, or that we are seeing, sorry, and that we're guessing that you're experiencing. For some nonprofits, your strategy is no longer relevant, or maybe you haven't quite gotten there, but you're about to be having this problem. For a lot of people, lack of funding is making you feel stuck. You've been asked to change dramatically, but you don't have a big honeypot of money to help you change in a rainy day waiting around. So you're not sure what to do. Maybe you're overwhelmed with the SBA loan stuff that came out. And there are a ton of free resources, but they're kind of like coming at you so much, and it can be hard to know where to turn. And so many people are in survival mode right now. Your clients, your team members. I've seen it in nonprofits. Other people are frozen with fear. I think, Abigail, you've even experienced some of these things, you know, with your clients and even within your own business, right?
Yes, just trying to navigate those resources. As a small business owner, we have a call center division that operates as a small business, and just navigating those resources, because the one thing I never wanted to do, and I haven't done, is lay off employees. We have a team of 202 contractors, so it was important to keep them on our payroll. And in order to do so, I myself had to reach out to the Small Business Administration and apply immediately. As soon as those links went live, we applied. There was no waiting to apply, because I wanted to make sure we had those resources in place so that we can continue to pay our employees, that we can continue to thrive as a business. So yeah, I definitely understand that fear factor from a business owner sense and from a client sense, because we're the, I had to think about my employees. I had to think about other business owners, because in that sense, they're the client. Where do we go? And I made sure, I offered services. I still offer those services for helping people navigate that.
Yeah, big thing. And I have really seen, not just with nonprofits, but in local businesses in my area, there are really two camps of people here. There are people who laid off people right away. I noticed that when I started sending out my emails just a couple of weeks ago, my emails to my list, I noticed all these emails coming back saying, I no longer work at this nonprofit. And that broke my heart to see that. But then I saw other nonprofits and other for-profit businesses saying, we're not laying anybody off. We're getting through this together. So if you're in that getting through this together mindset and you're like, but how do I actually get through this? We're here for you. Or if you're like, oh my God, I laid off all these people, but it didn't feel right. If you want to recover from that moment and change the way you move forward, we're here for you too. So I'd love, if you're watching us live, put it in the chat, or if you're watching the recording, put it in the comment section. For each of these things, are they true for you? Scale of 1 to 5, or you can throw out a comment if you want of like, yes, these are so true, or not really me. Or if there's anything else that you're experiencing, I encourage you to add it to this list. Because we'd like to know, this is a rapidly changing situation. We don't have this list isn't from hard data. This is from the stories that we're collecting, qualitative data, which is so valuable in a time of lots of change. You get that qualitative data and you act on it right away.
Exactly.
So, I'm going to give you a little bit of a sense of what's going on here and how you can think about your organization. And then later we're going to have a bonus discussion about exactly some things you need to be thinking about right now because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And Abigail's going to have some really helpful solutions for you that you can implement right away. But first of all, I want to tell you that while so many of these challenges that we've just been talking about they feel like it's because of the pandemic. Well, as a business strategist for nonprofits, I can tell you that all of these challenges were actually present in the nonprofit sector for most organizations that I see already, but they kind of were getting by enough that they didn't realize how serious they were or how much they needed to be addressed. But now that we're in pandemic mode, the light has been shown on them and people are realizing how various areas where they're not as strong can be crippling right now. But the good news in a way is most of these things actually aren't the result of, they're not really your fault. You may have been doing them, but there's a bigger picture at play here. We don't have time to go into it, but I highly encourage you to watch Dan Pelota's wildly famous TED Talk called The Way We Think About Charity is Dead Wrong, because he really summarizes very quickly so many things that are wrong with our whole system and concept of charity organizations, nonprofit organizations that are causing all sorts of things to go wrong internally and causing a lot of things to break down. I want to tell you just a short personal story that hopefully will highlight a point. But when I was a kid, my dad had had a rough childhood of sorts. And when we would ride in the car together, he would drive and my mom would sit in the front. This isn't actually them, but this is a lot what it looked like, except it was the early 80s. So we didn't have any fancy touch screens in the car. But I'd be in the back, and almost every single car ride, my dad would get really upset about something. I can't even remember what the somethings were, but red in the face and screaming and really angry, seemingly at me. And all this baggage from his childhood was coming along in that car with us. And we'd get in, it was like every time, it was so miserable. And then at one point I realized sometimes that didn't happen. And the rare occasions when my mom would drive and or when I would sit in the front and my mom would sit in the back, we weren't very likely to have one of these yelling, screaming moments with my dad. The chances went way down. And so as a kid, I started trying to sit in the front, but I didn't quite realize exactly what was going on, why I was doing that at the time. And then until I became a teenager and I got my driver's license. And when I started driving, my dad was thrilled and he thought it was really fun actually to sit in the back and pretend I was chauffeuring him around. And my mom would sit in the front. And we never had a single fight or yelling incidents when that was happening. And I tell you this story because it really illustrates that sometimes the way to get dramatically improved results is to change your approach.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't, years of therapy were going to be in place for other reasons, but we didn't have to bring the baggage from my dad's childhood into the car with us every time. And our way to not do that was simply to change what seats we were in. It was a very simple solution. And you can do that at your nonprofit. You don't have to bring the baggage from the history of charities with you and work through that. You can just skip it by changing your approach. Mm-hmm. And now I'm going to tell you how to do that, right? And Abigail sits on a couple boards, right, of nonprofits?
Yes, I sit on two.
Yeah, and you've seen some of this dysfunction happening in nonprofits?
I've seen this dysfunction, not in the two I sit on, because I sit there, but definitely in my experience working with nonprofit organizations, I have seen this dysfunction. And really what it is it's a lack of strategies, not knowing how to execute those strategies, and just not knowing how to put key people where they need to be to fully execute those strategies.
Yeah. So Abigail, I think she doesn't even necessarily know what I'm about to talk about, but she has just laid out my 3 points here. So there are 3 key things that you need to put in place. These are like your new seats. And I've called them PAM because it's a great acronym, but I always thought Emerald, the chef, would say PAM, which he would say BAM. So I was like, oh, PAM. And then poof, presto changeo, you have this wonderful nonprofit. And the 3 things are, you have to have a process for improvement, always going on, you're always improving. This is also, by the way, a change mechanism. So if you have this process in place right now, you can rapidly change to the new circumstances which we are in. You also have to have an actionable strategy. Strategy means goals and a way to achieve those goals. Just ways to achieve goals without goals, that's not a strategy. That's throwing tactics all over the place. And a strategy that's just goals with no way of achieving them, that's not helpful either, because nobody needs a set of goals that you're not going to achieve. Or at least I don't want goals that I'm not going to achieve. And finally, you need, I call it your modus operandi. You need an organizational structure, a way to organize everybody's roles and what they're accountable for. And you need to layer that in with a core sense of who you are as an organization, so that you attract people to work with you, whether they're your clients, your donors, your board members, or your employees, who are all kind of like, yeah, we know that organization and we're part of it and we feel like we belong. We call that alignment, and alignment is hugely important in making everything easier.
Exactly.
So today, I don't have time to kind of go deep into these 3 areas, but I want to give you a few examples of how they can work well, or where they might be kind of somewhat existent but falling apart. So process for improvement. I already said this is like a change mechanism, right? So let's start with the bad, because I love to start with the bad. And Abigail, I'm sure you have, maybe you can share a story of something you've seen of one of these. I've seen nonprofits, they have meetings, but they're really unfocused. And sometimes like they last forever and nothing ever gets done. They're not looking at their data, at all. Considering only quantitative data, but not the stories that are going on, or sometimes vice versa. They're looking at stories, but they're never looking at numbers. And they always tend to be like, their process of improvement is really a reaction process. They're like, oh, problem, we're just dealing with that present urgent crisis, and they're never being proactive about things. And sometimes they're just looking to their board to solve everything, or they might be looking to their executive director to solve everything. But no one person and no one board can provide every solution for your nonprofit. Do you have an example of this, a bad example that you've seen?
So I think I wouldn't necessarily call it a bad example. If you don't know better, you don't do better. So if this is what you know, these are the things that you practice. Whether, we look at it and say, that's not good, that's bad. But to the person doing it, they didn't know. But I have seen these meetings that just go on for what feels like hours. There's food even served. That's how long they go on. So having those actionable plans in place and utilizing other resources and services for those meetings. There's Boardable. I love the Boardable platform. I've implemented it for one of the nonprofit divisions, for one of the nonprofit organizations, and just having a way to have more focused meetings, meaning everyone knows what their part is, and having actionable plans where now everyone's accountable for what it is that they have been tasked to do, knowing who to give those tasks to, because sometimes we have needs and we give it to people who they can't, complete that task because that's not what they do. So that having platforms and just kind of stepping into those digital spaces and considering those platforms, you kind of make things much more efficient for your organization.
Yeah, so there are so many great digital tools that facilitate processes, right? And there's a process for improvement is a set of processes. It's the way you hold the meeting, it's the way you keep information, it's the way you organize it and present it to people. And internet-based tools are fantastic for that, especially right now. So what does a good process of improvement look like? Well, here are a few elements of that. You plan your review. You plan to review how you're doing, and you make time to do that. You can, every 2 weeks, every 2 months, quarterly, like stuff is going to come up. You're going to have learned things. So you don't have to wait for somebody to say, hey, I think we should take a look at what we've been doing. You should always plan to periodically take a look, a retrospective look. It should be a process that values vulnerability, because if you don't embrace vulnerability, you're not going to be able to expose your own vulnerabilities. And if you don't do that, you're going to always be reactive instead of proactive. You're also not going to get to the issues. I think later Abigail's going to talk a little bit about cultural competency, but this is an area, if your organization struggles with cultural competency, or if you have, I know DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion as an acronym is so popular right now. I'm sure we'll have some new terms soon, but ultimately, if you're struggling with changing how you've acted, valuing vulnerability is one of those key mechanisms for making sure that you don't just improve, but you improve in the areas that are deep-seated and hard to change. Once you value vulnerability and you have a consistent way of implementing changes and making, systematic improvement, you can change the hardest, most deep-seated problems in your organization or for your organization related to your mission. Proactively addressing issues. I was doing a training the other day and talking about the SWOT analysis, where you look at your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Well, those 4 quadrants are those 4 quadrants when you're in a reactive state. But when you are in a proactive state, all 4 represent opportunities. Your strengths are your opportunities. Your weaknesses show your opportunities. Your threats, I'm out of order here. Your threats show your opportunities, and your opportunities are like your low-hanging fruit opportunities. And you want to live in the world where all 4 of those quadrants are opportunities, not, hard things you're going to have to overcome. And I think we talked about a mechanism for change, but, this is the pieces that go into a great change mechanism is, who's involved with change, what's involved with change, where change happens, when it happens, and why change gets initiated. So a great process for improvement addresses all of those things. Having an actionable strategy. Oh my goodness, this is so important. I think we kind of touched on some of the bads here. I'd say the biggest one on this list that I see is people overload their plates. This is the one that I see the most often, is they take too much on at once and they end up almost going nowhere. Whereas if you take less, you can move much faster. I like to say, like, you know, only take on your plate what you can eat right now, and you can always go back for seconds. But if you overload your plate, the whole plate's just going to fall apart and you're not going to get anywhere.
We call those SMART goals.
SMART goals, yes. Actionable. It's got to be actionable. You have to break it down into something actionable. That doesn't mean you won't have big goals that aren't SMART goals, that are big BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals, things tied to your mission. But if you don't turn those into something, a bite-sized nugget, a SMART nugget, you're not going to make progress. So in a great actionable strategy, you always know your outcomes, but those SMART goals, the thing that you're actually going to take action on and that you can achieve, is going to be pulled out from that really big goal that you don't actually have control over. So for example, like, you might want to raise $200,000, which is code for get other people to give us $200,000. That's an outcome. Right? That's not where the goal ends. That's an outcome type of goal. It's a special type of goal, an outcome goal. But then you need to have that goal, the smarter version that's nested under that outcome of, like, we're gonna, you know, rebrand, we're gonna send out 1,000 emails, we're gonna do all these things. Those are the types of goals you can act on. In the impact method, we call them execution goals. But that's really important, because if you only have what you're going to execute on, you'll miss your mission as the big mark. And if you only have outcomes, then you're never going to feel like you're making progress. Prioritization is also so important, especially right now. I can tell you, my clients who are working with me, everything they were doing was already prioritized. So when they have to shift and adapt, they know exactly what to cut. They can turn on a dime just like that and eliminate the things they don't need to be doing right now, because it's already listed out. So that's really important too. With an actionable strategy, is also an adaptable strategy. And speaking of adaptation, right, our process for improvement, you need your strategy, your process for improvement linked to your strategy process, because at some point your strategy, you're going to learn something new, or the world will change around you, as it just has in a huge way. And you need to be able to change your strategy based on the best new information you have. I know, Abigail, you changed some of your strategy right away as soon as things started changing with the pandemic, right? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So I call it a few different things. Coming out of the education space, we call it continuing education. But you always have to be in a presence where you're optimizing, is what we call it in the digital space. But you're always refining those strategies. What's working, what's not working, and how can you improve? That's a continuous thing. That's something you're doing on a regular basis. That's not a one-time thing. That's not a once a year thing. That's a daily mindset to have. I know, when I was speaking of the call center division, that was important, because now, with everyone not being able to work outside the home, there are a lot more people needing to work inside the home. So going straight, as soon as those resources came available, going straight and applying for them, I was able to set up a nest, so to speak. So now that I can onboard more people. So now I'm helping in the economy, and our business is providing a true solution where people are not left unemployed. if I had a team that just kind of sat there and was like, well, we're just going to wait and see what happens, there will be no resolve. So for always being in a state of, okay, what's working?
Yeah.
If you're doing a practice and it's not working, stop doing it. And
Yes.
figure out what you need to do so that now it is working. Hire an expert, bring someone in, have a consultant come in. Don't be afraid to utilize those resources. And if you don't know where to go, that's the moment, what do you say, Google or Alexa or whatever you need to say, but you need to start reaching out so that you can get those solutions in place.
Yeah, absolutely. So true. And for those people who are very forward thinking, if this slide is speaking to you because you're a strategy lover, which is not everybody, but if you really approach your strategy proactively right now, people have talked about that, what is it, that we're, the new world, the new normal. Well,
Yeah.
I don't think we're at new normal yet. We're
No.
still in the change process, but a new normal is coming. And if you want to decide what new normal is for you, you need to be strategizing now. If you wait and see, new normal will be deposited upon you, and it will be what other people planned for, not what you chose. So if you want a voice, if you want choice in what the new normal is, you need to be building your strategy and making a plan to have the result from all this that you want. Because as much as there is hardship, there's opportunity and benefit and improvements to come out the other end with.
Mm-hmm.
So the third thing, your modus operandi, is all about your leadership structure and your identity, your core identity. Abigail's going to talk a little bit about digital marketing and branding, but before you can do branding, which is like dressing up your organization and expressing yourself to the world, you have to know who you are internally first. Because if you put a vision out into the world that doesn't really reflect who you are internally, then it will not be authentic. And you must be authentic if you want to move people. Inauthenticity is a communication and engagement killer almost every time. So you need that if you're going to communicate authentically. You also need it to keep your team together and to make sure you have the right team in place. And when I say team, I mean that broadly. It means your employees, your board, your supporters, your donors, the people you serve. They are your team. Some people call it your stakeholders, your constituents. They all need to be aligned because you all need to be wanting to essentially go in the same direction. And this affects how you're organized as well. That makes a huge difference. So some of we'll do the dysfunctional modus operandi or the less efficient modus operandi. Because really, when you have the wrong MO, it's just like, walking through thick mud. Everything feels harder than it should be. It's like issue with donors, issue with employees, everything is like 10 times harder than it needs to be. So this is one of those big areas where you really need to change your approach and everything will feel so much easier. So if you have like the machine model of leadership, sometimes called command and control, where one person is making all the decisions and everyone else is waiting for that person to make a decision, this is not great, and it's especially bad right now because let me tell you, that one person cannot handle all the decisions in a normal day, and they certainly cannot handle the decisions come about by a global pandemic. That might be a redundancy, global pandemic. You're the word person, Abigail. Maybe it's just a pandemic.
Yes, I love redundancy.
Redundancy, a global pandemic. It's tremendous. So you definitely, that is not a very effective way to provide leadership. And it also tends to make people pretty dissatisfied in their jobs because people want to feel agency. On the flip end of that is a shared model of leadership. This is where you get endless committees and very few decisions coming out. That's not great either because it's too slow and ineffective, and there's actually less accountability in in many cases when the only place where shared leadership kind of makes sense is at your board level, right? They're required by law to have a shared leadership model. And that is why anything that needs to be done quickly should not be at the board level. But it is good to have a group of people who are forced to run a three-legged race of shared leadership, because you don't want your board to move quickly. You want them to be thinking critically, and making carefully thought out, slow decisions with lots of information. So we already talked about branding without a brand, being task driven. This is where you get that, but this is the way we've always done it, as opposed to an outcome driven. And we talked about outcomes with strategy, but being outcome driven with how you operate is so important too. I love to use the example of, if your job is to answer the phone, you'll answer the phone. But if your job is to make sure that when people reach out to your organization, somebody is there to talk back to them. What happens in the first scenario when Facebook chat comes out? Well, you have what has happened. You have millions of nonprofits who don't answer their Facebook chat. People are talking to them and silence on the other end. But in the second case, you get somebody saying, oh, hey, my job is to make sure the call gets answered, the call. And we now have Facebook chat. Somebody's got to be answering that. Is anybody even calling us anymore? Do we need the secretary there all the time? Can we take them virtual? What about Instagram? And what about, all these other things that come up? So if you're outcome focused, you can adapt to the changing world. The fact that people are communicating has not changed in like 70,000 years. We're speaking to each other, but the mode that we use to do that is going to change. So that's really big. That's kind of, being more agile, being able to have this, ability to adapt to changing environments, put things out there and try them faster, and getting decisions kind of distributed throughout your organization is so important for so many reasons. I'd love to go into them, but I don't really have time. Abigail, is there something on here that really you have a great example for that you'd like to highlight?
Yes, I usually use this when in the final interview round, when people are wanting to come on board with us at Shinedelight. I use the analogy of a sink full of dishes. That's the problem, right? There's a sink full of dishes. And then there's a discussion about the sink full of dishes. There is literally a meeting about who's going to wash the dishes, how the dishes are going to get washed. And then while they're collaborating, having this unnecessary meeting, someone walks in and washes the dishes. So what I always say is I'm looking for the person who just comes in and washes the dishes, because that's the person that's going to execute every time. I think we get caught up in this. We don't necessarily understand collaboration and how to effectively apply it. So we end up over collaborating. We're spending more time talking about it and not enough time actually executing on some things. So what would make sense for a meeting like that is, there are dishes in this, dishes in the sink, and dishes end up in the sink regularly. How do we improve on this so that the dishes don't pile up? You start putting in place where now you have your employees be responsible for their own dishes, or you have a system in place for who washes the dishes, loads, if it means load the dishwasher. Now you bring in a solution, you put a dishwasher in place, and now you have people who, now you delegate a task where now someone comes in, unloads and loads the dishwasher. Now you're putting solutions in place, and now you're involving the team. So now there's not just a conversation about the dishes in the sink. Now everyone is actively participating and bringing about that resolve.
Yeah, that is such a great example. That highlights so many things. I hope you're taking notes, because that is such a great example of how being outcome driven from a kind of operations perspective opens you up to solving the real thing you need to solve, and having out of the box solutions. So fantastic. So we talked about PAM, having a process for improvement, having an actionable strategy, have a modus operandi. But what I want to tell you is that all of those things will help you make a bigger impact. And they will definitely improve things for your organization significantly. But if you really want to thrive, and by thrive, I mean not only are you making a big impact, but you're not feeling the overwhelm, you're not getting burned out. And if you're thriving right now during COVID-19, even though you might be feeling the grief that many people are feeling, you're still like, this is an amazing time to be in business. It is invigorating in many ways. Those are the thrivers right now. I know Abigail is one of them.
I got excited.
Yeah. The secret to really thriving is you need to optimize everything. So I'm not going to go deep into optimization today. I could probably do a whole day workshop on optimization, but I want to clue you into this little journey that really brings out optimization. And it all starts with focusing. You have to be focused. You have to like zone in and really get focused on something. And when you focus, you will gain clarity. And when you gain clarity, you will gain perspective on what's going on for you and around you. And once you get perspective, you will be able to feel certain. And certainty is something we all need right now. Those people who are certain in these times will attract many, many other people to follow them. And because what we get with certainty is trust. And there really should be two arrows with the trust, because trust is a two-way thing, right? People will trust you if you're certain. And in turn, you will be able to trust them. If it's your donors, they will trust you and give, and you'll be able to trust them to be around tomorrow. If it's your clients, you'll be able to trust them to work with you, and they will trust you to help them. And same with your employees. But it all starts with focus. I can't give you certainty today, but what I can give you is focus. And how can I do that is I have created the impact method, which is a set of systems and processes, which gives you PAM optimized already for you. So if you don't want to spend the 2 years that I spent figuring out how to really optimize PAM for nonprofits so that it not only results in impact, but also gets everybody trusting you, I would encourage you to schedule a call with me. I have a special link for you. Go to pivotground.com/Shinedelight for our joint webinar. I'll probably give everybody who contacts me here a special bonus, but I haven't decided what it is yet, because I love people who take action. But what I can tell you, I'm going to make sure on this call that it's the right fit for your organization. It is not for every organization, although it is for many, many organizations. And I have a way to help you whether or not you're small or large. But first, I'm going to make sure this is the right fit for you. And if it is, what I can tell you is it's not expensive. It is not a $15,000, $40,000 consulting engagement like a strategic planner. This is going to be in your budget. It is also not time consuming. In fact, many of the things you will do in the impact method will replace things that you're doing now that are not as effective. So it may not even take any extra time. And it's also going to make you feel great. It's going to start relieving the overwhelm and the burnout right away within the first couple of weeks. So if that sounds good to you, I would love to talk to you. pivotground.com/Shinedelight if you want to get the special bonus that I'm going to come up with for you. And Abigail has put together a fantastic bonus discussion with some things you need to be doing right now. And she's going to tell you how she can also help you right now, which leads into our first pro tip. I think, Abigail, you know about this, so I'm going to let you kick this one
off. Act, right? Don't wait to figure out, wait to see what it's going to look like. Because as we see today, if you don't act right away, everybody else who's action minded has already gone, has already got the resources, And
What did
now,
we see today? What happened was, because not everyone's watching live. We have some people on the recording. What came out this morning?
so the SBA announced that all of the monies that were allocated have to date been utilized. Not necessarily everyone has been given it, but it has been utilized, and they're no longer taking applications. So what does that mean? That means that everyone who went into immediate action, they got their monies already. They're about to receive their monies, or they will receive their monies. Everyone else who was just waiting to see what would happen, there's a lot of nonprofits that do that, or we'll just wait to see what the outcome is. No, you don't need to wait to see. You need to be in action plan mode. You need to be in execution mode. So that's what I saw today. And I know for our business and in our company, we don't do that. We act right away. So when it's something that needs to be acted on, we tend to do that quickly. And with the nonprofits that I'm a part of, it's the same concept. If there's something that we can take advantage of, we do it right away.
Yeah.
So that I want to see all nonprofits doing that.
Yeah, do it and do it now. You know, I think the for-profit world has this saying, time is money, but the nonprofit world doesn't seem to realize that applies to you too. Being slow is not saving you money. You are literally, there's so many areas I hear nonprofits think they're wasting money where they're not. It's actually a great investment that they're just not doing. But the other area, being slow, is the most expensive thing you could possibly do. So you've got to take action, and you've got to take action now. In this climate, it could literally be the difference between your nonprofit going under and coming out of this. You have the ability to come out of this not only as good as you went in, but better, but only for those who act. Those who do not are probably going to be the same or significantly worse, or perhaps gone. So our next tip is to reboot your core strategy, right? Your strategy might be out the window, so you got to do some rapid planning. If you're like, oh my God, I have no idea how this could possibly happen, schedule the call with me. I'd be so happy to talk you through it in a free consultation. But some of the tips that you should have in your strategy: invest in your digital capabilities. We're doing things remotely now, but I suspect we're going to be doing increasingly more remote things for a long time into the future. And you might actually discover, as some of us digital savvy people have all since way before this, that a lot of digital remote things are actually more efficient, cost effective, and get better results than their in-person equivalents. Enhance your fundraising strategy. Don't cut your fundraising budget. Put more money into it. Hire that expert. Rebuild your website. Redo your branding. Put out the letter already. Ask. And I've heard so many nonprofits say, oh, it's not a good time to ask people, they're hurting. Well, you're not forcing them to give to you. You're giving them the opportunity to give to you. And when people give to help solve problems that they care about, it makes them feel really good.
It does.
So you are giving people the opportunity to feel really good. And that's a good thing. Even if they've had a horrible experience recently, that is a good thing to give people. Anything you want to add specifically to this?
Yes, your fundraising strategy. There are a number of crowdfunding initiatives where you can actually just create a crowdfunding business page so that it's not event specific. There are a lot of organizations that heavily rely on donors to participate in events, or look for fundraising initiatives where they're centered around a theme, or it's Giving Tuesday and things like that. And even though those are wonderful and people respond to those, if you already have those crowdfunding business pages, now you're getting donations throughout the entire year.
Yeah, great point. And you said something about events. When I talk about reboot your strategy, right? Here's an example of not rebooting your strategy. If you just shift your in-person event and try to make it the same thing but virtual, that's probably not,
Not
you
going to
probably
work.
didn't reboot your strategy. What you probably need to do is shift from event-based fundraising to individual donor-based fundraising. And
Exactly.
the language around that, you can ask Abigail about. I encourage you to have a call with her, is,
Yeah.
how can I have a campaign to increase the number of donors, to raise awareness, to share what we're doing? That's actually been all along the more efficient, cost-effective way to fundraise. So
Exactly.
really rethink, what are our fundraising goals, and create a strategy kind of from scratch mentally, right? Don't just take the tactics from your current strategy and try to make them, mush them into the new world. Go back to your core goals and rethink what makes the most sense now.
Exactly.
And our last tip is, if your MO is lacking mojo, I think I was getting a little silly, I made this slide, take advantage of the upheaval and change now. But what I mean by this is, in our kind of normal state before the pandemic happened, if you wanted to change, you had to be the change agent and come and like get everybody realizing that things needed to change, and then you get some momentum, and then you could implement the changes. Well, the COVID-19 pandemic just did the first part for you. Everybody's in upheaval. Everything is ripe for change right now. So your change is going to be twice, 3 times, maybe 10 times as easy, because everybody's primed. Everybody's been forced into a change moment. Take advantage of that. This is the time to reorganize how your team operates, get those accountabilities in place, understand who you are at your core, really become aware of that. When I was younger, college age and out of college, I did a lot of living abroad. And I went to Africa for 5 months. I was in Cuba for 3 months. I spent a year in Japan after college. I spent a summer in Spain. And through all this traveling at kind of an age when I was growing up, I got to learn who's Sarah, like at her core, that never changes. And some of the things for me, the feeling of my smile, that is the same wherever I go. But you know what? Sarah doesn't always need toilet paper. When Sarah lives in Africa, where they often don't have a lot of toilet paper, at least where I was in Tanzania, no big deal. Sarah in the US, she uses toilet paper. There are things about, the way I live my life, or the way I dress, or the things I do that change with my context. But there are certain things about who I am that are always the same wherever I go. And you need to get in touch with that. And having a change experience like a pandemic is a great opportunity to get in touch with who you really are. All right, I think Abigail is not. Hallelujah. Let's do it. So I want you to hear a little bit about Abigail's services at Shinedelight, because she's got a special nonprofit division, and she has a focus that is going to be really helpful for you. So I'll probably chime in a little because I'm so excited about this stuff. But take it away and let me know when you want me to switch the slides.
So, so we're going to help you get your mojo. We're going to help you to develop those strategies and execute them. We're going to help you become digitally present. A lot of organizations offer really great services, but the problem is people don't know they exist. They don't know they exist, or their funding methods are heavily reliant on government assistance. So we're going to help you to get digitally aware, to create a donor platform where now you're visible, people know who you are, and the expected outcome is that now people will give more to your organization, because there's a lot more different ways that people can give in addition to monies, to help your nonprofit thrive and grow. So normally we say e-commerce solutions, because we're marketing in a digital space, but really what e-commerce means is digital marketing. It's just a fancy word for it. So what we do with
and if I can just chime in for a second, the reason why it's a fancy word for it is because everything having to do with your website and your social media, it needs to be goal oriented, right?
Exactly.
And usually there is some sort of commercial exchange, meaning you're getting a donor to give or you're getting a client to show up. If it's not goal oriented, I mean, it might be pretty, but so what?
Mhm.
So this is the kind of marketing that is about getting people to actually take action. It's goal oriented. So go on. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, it's goal oriented. We don't do anything without a goal. We're not one of those companies where we create things and you're like, okay, now what does it do? Once we start a relationship with you, we are with you until you get results. And even when you get the results, we're looking at what's working, what's not working, and how do we improve on it. So you do get a
There's that
functional
process of improvement.
Yes, yes. So you do get a functional relationship with us where I call it continuing education, but those strategies are always being looked at and revised. So we talked about events and the functionality of your events, how to coordinate events, what is the time frame for marketing those events. A lot of times we put out events, but we don't give people enough time to respond to them.
So true.
Or
I've seen
mhm.
that one over and over again. People are like, I'm going to have an event. It's next week. Let's market it. I'm like, oh, you missed the boat already. Sorry.
In a realistic situation, your event for this year should have been thought out and planned last year. So I can't do anything for the events you have planned this year other than put them out and kind of wait for those responses. But I definitely can help you put those strategies in place so that your events function seamlessly for the upcoming 2021.
That
Um,
is so important, I just have to say, because you might still be thinking about, oh man, we made our event digital or it was about to happen. We did a whole bunch of things. You slapped a whole bunch of things together. That's okay. But your event next year, you need to, really leverage everything you can and make it significantly better so that you can recoup or do even better or leverage everything you've just learned by rapidly slapping a makeshift event together online.
Exactly. And with the pandemic, and Sarah has already touched on this, and I want to just add to what she's already said. Think about it. Now your events have changed. And for some people, the thought process is, well, I'll just do it online. No, that's not that may work, it may not work. But then how do you keep that donor? How do you keep that event based? And how do you repurpose that? If you have actionable strategies, then you are always able to respond to crises. What I've been encouraging companies and organizations to do is all of these things that required physical attendance. If you're able to do it online, do it online. If not, in the nonprofit world, keep those donors. I do apologize, we're not able to have our event this year given the COVID circumstances. Um, is it okay if we apply those donations elsewhere? You'll be surprised. People won't mind because they bought those tickets with the idea that they were donating that money anyway.
Yeah.
They were just attending an event in turn. So changing the way you look at things and think about them and turning them into actionable strategies will help your nonprofit.
Yeah, I want to jump in and just say too about that, right? Because I don't want to totally bash events. If you put
Mhm.
events into a larger marketing strategy and you think of your events as a way to introduce new people to your organization, then events can be really effective. But if you think of
Exactly.
them as the whole thing, that's
Hmm.
not it.
Right.
So you can totally take your events and leverage all the good juice out of them without
Exactly.
taking all the stuff that doesn't work so well.
And those analysis pieces, that data is important. So how are you measuring things? Are you measuring things? A lot of organizations that I've come across, there is no measurement. They're kind of just flying by the souls. So
Yeah.
in that sense, there's no organization to the organization. So looking at your analysis, processes. What are your metrics? How are you measuring success? What does that look like? We call it forecasting in an e-commerce world. Do you have a forecast? What is your expectancy in terms of numbers, in terms of donors? What are you looking to accomplish within a year with your nonprofit organization? And do you have those plans put in place to execute it? Social media marketing. If you're online now, if you have a social media page, you know that it's been flooded. People are bored, extroverts especially. They need an outlet. They want information. This is the perfect time to be giving out those webinars, to be engaging with your audience, letting people know who you are as an organization. If you're offering services that now, even during the pandemic, how you can help. That is a perfect platform to do it. Website, oh my God, I cannot tell you. Websites with the ability to always adapt to whatever changing times there are. A lot of websites that I see in nonprofit spaces are dormant. They may have had it created 5, 10, 15 years ago, and it's like, okay, so what's next?
Yeah, the website is like your central home hub online. It should be
Yeah,
vibrant. You should be able to adapt it, and it should
yeah,
do something for you.
yeah.
It's not a
Exactly.
brochure.
No, no, it's not your resume. Even, and even that is changing. You're starting to see some functionality with that. So you want to make your website not just visible to your donors. A lot of times organizations only think about the donor when they create the website, but I want you to also consider your client. How can they go to your website? And is it interactive enough where they can leave your website having applied for the service that they need or sent you a message about the service that they need? Everything doesn't require physical interaction. Some things do, but not everything. So are you prepared to do that for your clients and not just have a website built for people to donate?
And right now, if your clients can't actually engage with you on your website, they probably can't engage with you.
Exactly.
And that's not achieving your mission. And we also need to be making sure that those most vulnerable people are continuing to get the supports that they need.
Exactly. Strategy and optimization in your content. Please, we have a separate masterclass series that we're going to be launching, where we talk about content strategy and content optimization. Please don't just get GoDaddy as your hosting site, because most people don't realize that GoDaddy is not a website. GoDaddy is the hosting platform for your website. Please don't just go get a website, throw a bunch of content on it that you got off of someone else's website,
Yeah.
and just change a few words and make it your own. No, have someone write the content specific to your organization, who you are, what your core values are, how you can actually help the client, what your mission is, and to your donors, how they can participate and how they could help in your efforts to bring about results in your mission statement.
Yeah, I just want to say this is the most important thing about your marketing is your content. If you can't afford anything else or you're on a budget, spend here first.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about the backbones of your website. Yes, you need a good backbone. You need it to do things for you. And yes, eventually it probably would benefit greatly from some great visuals and some graphic design. All of those things are secondary to having great content to express who you are and what you do, because none of the other stuff matters if it's not paired with great content. Are we ready for the next slide? And I have a hard stop coming up in 7 minutes. So we're going to wrap things up here for you. And if you have questions, you can always reach out to us. We'll leave information in the comments when we post this live and send it out to everybody. Not post it live, post it on YouTube. But Abigail has some great services that are exactly the kind of things that most nonprofits need. So will you take us through those?
So I'll be very quick because I want to go to the next slide. So how you market. We don't take advantage of our marketing initiatives enough. There's email automation, which is email marketing. Send out those 10,000 emails. that's where your donors are. That's who's opening those emails. That's who's going to be able to support your organization throughout the year. Those are your non-event specific people. We've already
They
talked.
already said they wanted to hear from you.
Yes,
So
they
talk to them already. They said, hello, I want to hear from you.
exactly. Give them updates. Give them a reason to want to stay engaged with your organization. If you don't have your business pages on your social media platforms built, or if you need to have them optimized, we do that as well. And having a group page within like Facebook and so that now you're talking to specific donors, and clients, you can do that as well. Next slide.
All right, I'll just say all of this, what this means for you as an organization is speed. The fact that Shinedelight has it all set up, they have all the processes in place, they do all the things together, is going to save you a ton of time. And that is what you need to save right now. I also happen to know it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg. You can, and you probably should be making sure you can afford these kinds of services. And it's going to save you a lot in speed. And you also save a lot when you get a bunch of things under one house as well. This one is really special. I know I'm hijacking Abigail's slide, but this is not something you see from most developers. So tell us about ADA compliance.
So ADA compliance is across the board. A lot of times businesses, companies, nonprofit organizations, they create their platforms and exclude an entire population of people. ADA compliance is essential. You can actually be fined if you're not in compliance with ADA regulations. So that audience, right? Persons with disabilities, they access the websites too. They need services too. They need to be able to come onto your website, be able to navigate your website without harm to themselves, and to be able to get to the resolution page. The checkout page is what we call it in the e-commerce space, but your resolutions page, and apply for those services or donate. If we provide that ADA compliance for you, we make sure that your websites and your social media platforms are complying with ADA standards, and that population of people can access your websites and your social media platforms.
So important. And, especially as nonprofits, especially you human service nonprofits, these are your people. And there is a lot of work that needs to be done here, because even though it is the law, very few sites are compliant. I'll just share a short story. When I was first building websites, not just for nonprofits, I had a client who was blind and sold an audio program for blind people. And it was so revealing. I actually went and started to learn how to use a computer screen reader so I could test the site myself. And the internet is not a fun place for blind people, and it makes the world of a difference when a site is compliant. Now, things have gotten better since then, especially, I don't know if you've noticed, but YouTube is now auto captioning things, which, by the way, is a big hint. If you need a free source for captioning, upload your video to YouTube, and then you can download the captions they made for you if you want to provide a transcript. But this is so important. And I bet if you ask your current web developer whether or not they can tell you if your site is even ADA compliant, or if they've made it ADA compliant, chances are they'll say, we don't know how to do that.
And that's when you send them to us, because
Yes.
we
They'll
do
fix it for you.
Yes.
There is no shame wherever you are at now. You're okay. But now that you know, you have to do something about it.
When you know better, you do better. And that's one of those things, because you want everyone to be included. So we make sure we stress digital inclusion, and that's what when you have your website done with us, you actually get a seal. It's a certificate. So you have a seal on your website that lets others know that your website is ADA compliant.
Yeah, great.
Design services. So the focus is always content. That's priority before anything else. But once you have great content, once you have great
You
content,
don't want great design once you have great content.
Sarah, it needs a picture. It needs a beautiful picture, a cat, something, but it needs it needs a picture. So we do offer those design services where we create specific to your brand. A lot of times there are images that have nothing to do with who you are, what your organization does, and it's like, oh, so you're raising money for puppies? No. Oh, you're not? Okay.
Yeah.
So we create those design elements that actually make sense for your organization.
Fantastic. And we said we were talking about cultural competency.
Yes.
I've got 2 minutes. So I hate to cram cultural competency into 2 minutes, but this is really important. So what can you tell us in a few minutes, Abigail?
You have to have cultural competency. A lot of times, a lot of organizations, they're not known because they don't know how to engage with other cultures. They don't know how to engage with other communities. Communities are changing. Diversity is everywhere. So your organization needs to include a manual. We write that cultural competency piece for you. Some do require a committee. We show you how to implement a committee that is very execution driven and not just wanting to sit around and talk about the dishes, but actually putting some things in place. So we do that for you because it's important that you are able to reach out to your donors and your clients, so that everyone is participating in your organization.
Yeah, this is such an important topic on so many levels, but when it just related to marketing and especially related to fundraising, you're leaving a ton of money on the table.
It's a
ton
ton
of money on the table by not, because there are so many cultures that are generous and motivated to be generous by one thing or another, and tapping into that and to them opens up a whole big world for you of more money. And when it comes to your clients too, this is really important, because if you want to be able to reach the maximum number of people that you can really make a big difference for, you need to be doing this for your mission as well. And then of course, internally, right, we all are better by having a diverse set of perspectives, because that's, and to be vulnerable, right? I think one of the things about cultural competency that, what I don't love about the word competency is you don't have to know everything, but you should try, and you need to be ready to comfortable with being vulnerable about what you don't know. You don't know what you don't know, but seek to find it out. Be open.
Be sensitive is really what it should say. Cultural sensitivity. Being sensitive to other cultures and doing away with the stigma is really what our manuals and our guides kind of really help you do, because a lot of the things that we operate out of are stigmas. So we help you to overcome those stigmas, and once you do that, then your cultural competencies plans are in place, and you're able to engage.
So important. And this goes to, we were talking earlier about, your MO, right? And when you can let go of stigma, you're really able to tap into everybody's brain who's connected to your organization. And that will give you such a huge capacity boost. The stigma is holding you back. It is keeping you depowered, devalued, all of those things. So yes, being culturally competent, diversity, equity, inclusion. I think too often we think of this as it's good for other people. No, it is good for you. I had felt the same way when my son was born and I was breastfeeding. I mean, they keep talking about how good breastfeeding is for the baby, but they almost never talk about how good breastfeeding is for the mom. I'm like, if they focused on that, they might have much more success getting moms to breastfeed.
Flat stomachs. You get flat stomachs and gorgeous.
I was losing 5 pounds a week eating cake and bacon for breakfast. Almost every day. I'm like, this is awesome. The average woman burns 500 calories a day breastfeeding. That's
Breastfeeding.
equivalent, I think, of running on a treadmill for an hour or something ridiculous like that. Anyway, this is cultural competency for you. It is great for other people for sure, but it is really, really great for you in your marketing and how you're running. Like, this is so important. I have to run. This has been fantastic. Where can people reach you?
So you can go to our website. We are ShineDelightServices.com. We're on every social media platform you can think of. You can also email us. Abigail Davidson at ShineDelightServices.com. We literally are everywhere. If you Google Shine Delight, you'll see that we're pretty much integrated in the digital space.
Fantastic. Well, reach out if you need help. I know both Abigail and I, we're such givers. We want to talk to you, even if we're not going to do business with you. I love talking to nonprofit people. You're our people. So we encourage you to reach out. Thank you so much. We've got excellent. So thank you, everybody. If you're watching this in the recording, reach out with a comment, send us an email, contact us through one of our sites.